February 1978, the California wilderness. When the snow finally melted, they found him. Ted Weiher, wrapped in 8 sheets, frozen, starved to death. But here's what doesn't make sense. He wasn't alone when he got there. Someone had broken the window to let him in. Someone had opened cans for him. Someone had helped him survive. He was surrounded by food. Enough food to feed 5 men for a year. The trailer had propane. He never turned it on. There were matches. He never lit a fire. There was a wood-burning stove. He never used it. Medical examiners would later determine he'd been alive in that trailer for 8 to 13 weeks. Months. Slowly dying of starvation while sitting next to enough calories to survive. His body, when they found it, had wasted away to almost nothing. He'd lost nearly 100 pounds. Why? This is the story of 5 men who abandoned a working car to walk into a blizzard, who climbed 19 miles up a mountain in street shoes, who passed multiple turnoffs back to civilization, who had every opportunity to survive and chose not to. It wasn't the cold that killed them. It was the fear of something worse. February 24th, 1978, Chico, California. 5 men left for a basketball game. None of them would make it home. Before we talk about what happened that night, you need to understand who these men were, because that's what makes this case so haunting. Jack Madruga, 30 years old, an Army veteran who'd served honorably and come home to build a normal life. He worked at a produce distribution center, reliable, showed up on time, never caused problems. He loved his car, that 1969 Mercury Montego, took care of it, kept it running perfectly. His friends called him Jack. His family said he was responsible, careful. Jackie Huett, 24 years old. He worked at his father's gardening business. Physical labor, honest work. People who knew him said he was friendly, a little quiet but kind. He lived with his parents, had a routine, liked his life. Ted Weiher, 32 years old. Everyone called him gentle, patient. He had an intellectual disability, but he functioned well. He worked. He had friends. He was part of the community. The thing people always said about Ted was that he never complained. He was easy to be around. Bill Sterling, 29 years old. Same story. Intellectually disabled, but functional. Worked a job. Had family who loved him. Was described by everyone as nice and dependable. These weren't people who wandered off. These were men with structure, with people waiting for them. And then there was Gary Mathias, 25 years old. Gary was different. He'd served in the Army like Jack, but Gary's service had ended differently. He'd been diagnosed with schizophrenia while enlisted. The Army discharged him, put him on medication. When he took his medication, Gary was fine, functional, good company. His family would later say he was doing well in early 1978, staying on his meds, keeping his life together. But Gary's medication required daily doses. Miss a day and things could get complicated. These 5 men were friends. They spent time together. They had something in common that mattered to them. Basketball. They were part of a team called the Gateway Gators. a league for intellectually disabled adults run by the local Parks and Recreation Department. This wasn't just recreation. This was important to them. They practiced. They had games. They had a championship coming up. The next day, February 25th, they had a tournament game. A big one. They had been talking about it for weeks. They were excited. On the night of February 24th, they decided to do something fun before the big game. They drove to Chico, about an hour away, to watch a college basketball game. UC Davis versus Chico State. 5 guys, 1 car. A Friday night. The game ended around 10 p.m. They stopped at Bears Market on the way home. Security footage showed them. Receipts confirmed it. They bought snacks, hostess pies, milk, cigarettes. Normal stuff, the kind of thing you grab for a late night drive. Then they got in the car. Jack Madruga was driving. It was his car. The drive home to Yuba City was simple. Straight shot down Highway 70. They'd done it before. They should have been home by midnight. Their families expected them. The championship game was the next morning. They never arrived. When the 5 men didn't show up for the championship game the next morning, people noticed immediately. This wasn't like them. These were responsible guys. They'd been excited about this game. The families called the police. Search parties formed. They checked the route from Chico to Yuba City. They checked hospitals. They checked everywhere. Nothing. No sign of the car. No sign of the men. For 4 days, it was a complete mystery. Then, on February 28th, a Forest Service employee was driving up a remote mountain road in the Plumas National Forest. And he saw a car. The Mercury Montego. 70 miles from where it should have been. Here's what doesn't make sense about the location. To get where the car was found, Jack Madruga would have had to 1. Miss the turn for Highway 70 entirely. 2. Drive toward the mountains instead of away from them. 3. Turn onto a narrow mountain road that had no reason to be on his route. 4. Drive up that road for miles, in the dark, in the snow. Why would he do that? There's no scenario where that route makes sense. No shortcut. No reason. When investigators arrived at the car, they found something even stranger. The car wasn't crashed. It wasn't damaged. It was parked, neatly, on the side of the road. The rear wheels were resting on a small snowbank. Not stuck, just resting. Investigators tried the engine. It started immediately. No problems. The gas tank still had a quarter tank. Plenty to get home. 5 grown men could have pushed that car off the snowbank in 30 seconds. Instead, they walked away from it. The keys were missing. The windows were rolled down. The turn signal had been left on, draining the battery. Inside the car, investigators found the snacks from Bears Market, uneaten. They also found something else. Candy wrappers, from food they'd eaten before arriving at this spot. Which means they were calm enough to eat, relaxed enough to snack. This wasn't a panicked escape. This wasn't a crash. So, what made Jack Madruga a careful, responsible driver abandon his beloved car on a mountain road in the middle of a snowstorm? Investigators had no idea what had happened or why the car was there at all. What they did know was that the men had to be somewhere nearby. In weather like this, they couldn't have gone very far on foot. Search teams began moving into the surrounding wilderness. The weather, however, was brutal. Snow lay deep across the ground, far deeper than anyone expected. Visibility was terrible, with wind and blowing snow making conditions even worse. Days passed with no answers. Then days turned into weeks, and eventually weeks became months. The snow was simply too heavy for a thorough search. The terrain was steep, remote, and dangerously difficult to navigate. In the end, there was only one option left. They would have to wait for the thaw. When the snow finally melted in June, a motorcyclist was riding through the area, moving slowly along the trail. He saw something off the trail, something that didn't belong there. A skull, bones scattered nearby. He called the police immediately. The search intensified almost at once. Teams combed the area, spreading out through the forest. On June 4th, they found Bill Sterling's remains. Then, not far away, Jack Madruga's. Both men were found near a place called Refugee Creek, about 11 miles from the car. 11 miles. They'd walked 11 miles, uphill, through deep snow, in street shoes. Both had died of hypothermia and exposure, probably within the first night or two. Their bodies showed no signs of trauma, no violence. They'd just walked until they couldn't walk anymore. And then they'd lay down in the snow. But that still left 3 men unaccounted for. Ted Weiher, Jackie Huett, and Gary Mathias. Investigators then checked a Forest Service trailer, about 19 miles from the car. Up the mountain, even farther from civilization. And that's where they found him. Ted Weiher. The trailer belonged to the Forest Service. It was used by workers during fire season. In winter, it was locked, isolated. No one should have been there. But someone had broken the window. Someone had climbed inside. When investigators entered the trailer, they found it exactly as the Forest Service had left it. Except for one thing. The trailer was stocked with supplies, canned food, dehydrated meals, military sea rations. Enough food to feed all 5 men for over a year, maybe longer. There was a propane tank connected to a heater, full. There were matches, candles, blankets, sheets. There was a wood-burning stove with wood stacked next to it. Everything you'd need to survive a winter. On the bed, wrapped in 8 sheets, they found Ted Weiher. He'd been dead for months. The medical examiner estimated Ted had survived in that trailer for 8 to 13 weeks. 2 to 3 months. When they found him, his body had wasted to almost nothing. He'd lost between 80 and 100 pounds. He'd died of a combination of starvation and hypothermia. But Ted Weiher didn't starve quickly. He starved slowly, over weeks, while surrounded by food. Investigators found evidence that he had eaten some of the rations. Several cans had been opened, but only a few of them, not nearly enough to sustain him for long. He had rationed the food so severely that he had essentially starved himself. Why would someone do that? The propane heater was right there in the trailer, a full tank, ready to be used at any moment. He never turned it on. The wood-burning stove had wood stacked beside it. Matches were sitting in the drawer. He never lit a fire. The medical examiner noted something else. Ted had severe frostbite on his feet, so severe that his feet were essentially destroyed. He had wrapped himself in those 8 sheets, layering them carefully, trying in some way to stay warm. But he never used any of the actual heating sources available to him. Ted Weiher had every tool he needed to survive. Heat, food, shelter. And he used almost none of it. He chose, consciously or not, to remain cold, to remain hungry, to remain in the dark. Something in that trailer, or something inside Ted's mind, made survival feel more dangerous than death. And that brings us to the next piece of this puzzle. The piece that might explain everything. Here's a detail that changes everything. C rations, military rations, require a specific opener to access them. It's called the P38, a small folding can opener. You can't open C rations without one, at least not easily. Now think about that for a moment. Ted Weiher had no military training. He wouldn't have known what a P38 was. He wouldn't have known how to use one. Jack Madruga had military training, but Jack was dead 11 miles away. Bill Sterling had no military background. Neither did Jackie Huett. But Gary Mathias knew exactly what a P38 was. Gary had served in the Army. He would have used one hundreds of times. Using it would have been second nature to him. Investigators found the P38 in the trailer. It had been used. Multiple cans had been opened with it, which means Gary Mathias was in that trailer. He was there with Ted. Gary opened those cans. Gary helped Ted eat. Gary kept him alive. For a while, at least, Ted wasn't alone. Someone was taking care of him. Someone was still functioning. Someone knew how to survive. And yet, even with Gary there, even with someone who understood the situation, they still didn't light a fire. They still didn't turn on the propane. They still stayed in the dark and the cold. Why would Gary, a trained soldier, leave a man in a freezing trailer with a broken window? Why wouldn't he have turned on the heat, especially when it was right there, ready to use? Why wouldn't he have made sure Ted could survive on his own, at least long enough to stay alive? Then, at some point, Gary left the trailer. He walked out of it. Into the wilderness, into the cold, and into the dark. And after that moment, he was never seen again. No trace of Gary Mathias has ever been found. Not a bone, not a piece of clothing, not a single clue of any kind. Of all 5 men, Gary is the only one who simply vanished. No body, no remains, nothing at all. Jackie Huett's skull was found near the trailer months later. The cause of death was unknown. His remains were too decomposed to determine what killed him. So Jackie was there too at some point? 3 men made it to that trailer. 1 starved to death, surrounded by food. 1 disappeared without a trace. And 1 man's cause of death will remain a mystery forever. Let's talk about Gary Mathias. Before he was discharged from the Army, Gary had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. It was serious enough that the military ultimately deemed him unfit for service. Paranoid schizophrenia is not something you can simply shake off. It doesn't go away. It can be managed with treatment. but it never truly disappears. With medication, Gary was fine. His family said he was doing well in early 1978. Stable, functional, present in his daily life. But the medication Gary took required daily doses. Every single day, without exception. Miss a dose and symptoms could begin to return. Miss multiple doses and things could become dangerous. Not just for Gary himself, but potentially for everyone around him. Gary didn't have his medication with him that night. The theory that still haunts investigators goes like this. What if Gary missed his medication that day, or possibly even the day before? What if, as they were driving home from the game, Gary began to experience symptoms? Paranoia, delusions, intense, overwhelming fear. What if Gary saw something, or believed he saw something, that terrified him? Something the other four men simply could not see. Something that felt completely real to him. What if he told Jack to turn off the highway? Told him they needed to hide? And what if Jack, trusting his friend, did exactly that? What if the other men were confused, frightened, unsure of what was happening, and simply followed along? These were men who depended heavily on structure, on routine, on the people they trusted most. If Gary believed there was danger, they would have had little reason to question him. What if Gary became convinced someone was following them, watching them, chasing them? What if he told them to leave the car, to walk, to disappear into the forest? What if he believed with absolute certainty that staying on the road meant death? And what if the other four, Bill, Jack, Jackie, and Ted, trusted him enough to follow? Into the snow, into the darkness, and eventually up the mountain itself. Possibly because Gary told us to go. Think carefully about what that possibility means. It suggests the car may not have been abandoned out of blind panic or confusion. It suggests it may have been abandoned out of trust. It suggests that Bill and Jack did not simply lose their way or wander off the trail. It suggests they followed someone they believe was guiding them toward safety. And it raises another chilling possibility, that when Gary eventually found the trailer, broke the window, and helped Ted get inside, the fear may not have stopped. What if Gary told Ted not to light a fire, not to turn on the heat? Because in Gary's mind, smoke might have revealed their location. Light might have made them visible. And whatever he believed was following them might have found them. And what if Ted, known for his loyalty, his kindness, and his deep trust in his friends, listened to him? What if Ted remained inside that freezing trailer, wrapped in layers of sheets, surrounded by heat he was too frightened to use, simply because Gary warned him not to? And what if Ted waited there, day after day, week after week, waiting for Gary to return and tell him it was finally safe? Gary never came back. Gary Mathias is still missing. No remains have ever been recovered. No physical trace has ever been located. Nothing has ever been found that confirms what ultimately happened to him. Of all 5 men involved in this tragedy, Gary is the only one who simply vanished without explanation. The others were eventually found. Bill Sterling and Jack Madruga were discovered 11 miles from the abandoned car. Ted Weiher was found inside the Forest Service trailer. Jackie Huett's remains were located near that same trailer months later. But Gary, there was nothing. The truth is, we will probably never know. There is no way to conclusively prove either theory. But the fact that investigators seriously considered this possibility tells you something about how baffling and impossible this case has always felt. 5 men, a fully functioning car, a routine drive home that should have ended without incident. And somehow, everything unraveled. Either from the inside, with Gary's mind potentially fracturing under the weight of untreated illness, or from the outside, with another unknown force or individual acting with deliberate intent. One of those two possibilities unfolded on that mountain. And there is a very real chance we may never learn which one it was. Let's go through what we actually know happened. Not what we think happened, not what we suspect, only what we can say with certainty. February 24th, 1978. 5 men attend a basketball game together. After the game, they stop for snacks on the drive home. By all accounts, it is a normal night. Somewhere between Chico and their homes, Jack Madruga drives nearly 70 miles in the wrong direction. He takes the car up a remote mountain road in the middle of a snowstorm late at night. He parks the car carefully, neatly. He leaves the turn signal blinking. He takes the keys with him. All 5 men get out of the car. They leave their food behind. They leave warmth behind. And they begin to walk straight into a blizzard. In complete darkness, wearing street shoes. They walk 19 miles, uphill, through deep, heavy snow. Bill Sterling and Jack Madruga make it 11 miles. Hypothermia overtakes them. They lay down in the snow, and they die there. Gary Mathias, Ted Weiher, and Jackie Huett somehow continue on. They make it the full 19 miles up that mountain. To a locked Forest Service trailer, Gary breaks a window to get inside. He brings Ted into the trailer. He opens food cans using a military P-38. He keeps Ted alive for weeks, maybe even months. Gary stays there with him, helping him survive. And then one day, Gary leaves. He walks out of the trailer, back into the wilderness, and he disappears forever. Ted remains behind, now completely alone. Surrounded by food he barely eats. Surrounded by heat he never turns on. Wrapped in 8 sheets inside a freezing trailer. He dies slowly, over weeks and more weeks and more weeks still. Until one morning, he simply does not wake up. That is what we know. Now here's what we don't know. We don't know why Jack drove off the highway that night. We don't know why the men decided to leave the car behind. We don't know why they chose to walk uphill instead of down toward lights and civilization. We don't know why Ted never lit a fire. We don't know why Gary eventually left Ted alone in that trailer. We don't know where Gary Mathias went. And we don't know if someone else was out there with them. And the truth is, we will probably never know. The Plumas National Forest is enormous. It spans thousands of acres. Dense wilderness. Brutal winters. It is a place that keeps its secrets well. But the silence this case leaves behind is the loudest thing about it. Because this was not a case of simply getting lost. 5 men with a working car do not just get lost. This was not a case of bad luck. Bad luck does not explain Ted Weiher, sitting next to a year's worth of food and slowly starving to death. This was a case of men who made choices, choices that led them away from survival, choices that led them directly toward death. And whatever drove those choices, whether it was Gary's mind or something outside of it, it was powerful enough to override every instinct to stay alive. The families of the Yuba County Five have never received real answers. Investigators have theories, but no proof. Gary Mathias' family still holds out hope, even after 47 years. But most people believe Gary is gone, that he died somewhere on that mountain. Just like the others, 5 men, 1 night, a decision that still makes no sense. What do you think happened that night? Was it Gary's mental illness? A psychotic episode that led them all to their deaths? A man without his medication, seeing things that weren't there, dragging 4 men into a blizzard because he believed they were being followed? Or was there really someone else on that mountain? Someone who was there that night and vanished just as completely as Gary did? I don't have the answer. Nobody does. But I'll tell you this. Ted Weiher died in a trailer with a fire he could have lit. With food he could have eaten. With warmth he could have turned on. And he chose none of it. Not because he wanted to die, but because something made survival feel impossible. Something made him believe that staying cold, staying hungry, staying silent was safer than being found. Whatever that something was, it was enough. The mountain keeps its secrets, but the silence it left behind is deafening.